Yesterday, in the Crown Court, the jury heard how Mikis Lianos, multimillionaire, shipowner, husband and lover of some of the world's most beautiful and eligible women, has been accused of raping chemist assistant Linda Davis. In her evidence, Linda described how, after a party on board the yacht Liana, the accused man took her back to the Mid-Atlantic Hotel in Fulchester and there had intercourse with her against her will. As the trial enters its second day, Linda's mother, Mrs. Doris Davis, is in the witness box, being examined by counsel for the Crown, Miss Helen Tate.
4 o'clock it was when she came in. In a terrible state she was, crying her eyes out.
Did Linda tell you why she was crying?
She didn't all. She said that...
Mrs. Davis.
Mrs. Davis, I'm afraid we can't have all the conversation because that's not admissible. But did Linda make a complaint to you at any time?
Yeah, she complained about that Greek fellow who'd been bothering her.
Now, members of the jury, this may seem a little strange to you. As a general rule of law, we do not admit hearsay evidence, what the soldier said, to put it in the vernacular. But in cases of rape and indecent assault, we do allow evidence of a complaint made by the victim immediately after the event, on the basis that the complainant has or has not been consistent in her story. So we may hear what Linda said to her mother.
I'm most grateful to my lord. So, Mrs. Davis, will you tell us, what did Linda say to you?
Do you want the exact words?
Well, we're all men and women of the world, Mrs. Davis, yes. Tell us exactly what she said.
She said that Mickey had the pants off me and forced me against my will.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Did you and your husband then subsequently take Linda to the police station?
We did.
And did she then repeat her complaint to Detective Inspector McGovern?
She did.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Please stay there.
Mrs. Davis, you have told us it was 4 o'clock in the morning when your daughter came home.
That's right.
How did you know it was 4 o'clock?
Well, we was waiting up for her, wasn't we? It stands to reason.
Why does it stand to reason, Mrs. Davis? Were you worried about your daughter?
Well, of course we were worried, sir. Wouldn't you be?
Oh, my worries don't come into it, Mrs. Davis. Why were you worried?
Well, my Linda's a very pretty girl, sir, although I say it myself. Pretty enough to be bothered by some right scallywags.
Your daughter's pulchritude is the source of... Your daughter's all too obvious charms are the source of some anxiety to you, are they, Mrs. Davis?
Well, you can put it this way, sir. When my Linda leaves this court, they'll be round her like bees round a honey pot, including some who should know better.
So, when your daughter stays out until the wee small hours, you're worried enough to stay up and wait for her?
Wee small hours, sir. Little madam's such a flipping film star, I worry every time she goes to get herself a bleeding Coca-Cola from the corner.
Mrs. Davis.
I suffer with me nerves, you understand, sir. I'm under the doctor.
Well, Mrs. Davis, you have our deepest sympathy. I'm sure that most of us will understand your most natural fears when you find your lovely daughter stopping out until the early hours of the morning.
Well, 12 o'clock's one thing, 4 o'clock's another.
It is indeed. We all have to learn to draw the line somewhere, don't we?
Yes, that's right.
And you drew the line at your daughter stopping out until 4 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I don't know who she's been with or what she's got up to.
Oh, these are matters which are important to you, are they, Mrs. Davis, who she's been with and what she's got up to?
Well, I'm her mother, aren't I?
Oh, you are indeed, and I'm certain that the jury will regard your concern for your daughter as perfectly natural and entirely proper. Now, Mrs. Davis, would you be concerned and worried if you knew that your daughter was having a series of casual affairs?
Well, of course I would, sir. With her look, she could have got to Hollywood if she'd been a bit more choosy. Besides, she might catch a disease.
She might indeed. Or she might become pregnant.
Oh, no, not my Linda. She's got more sense.
Well, the truth of the matter is that she has become pregnant, hasn't she?
Yes, but it weren't her fault. That little so-and-so forced her.
Oh, well, that's a matter for the jury to decide. As far as you are concerned, Mrs. Davis, you would be extremely distressed to find that your daughter was pregnant outside wedlock from whatever source that pregnancy came.
Well, that's right, but that night none of us knew she was pregnant. Well, how could we at that stage?
Mrs. Davis, you will agree that a woman can know that she is pregnant long before there are any external signs of pregnancy.
Oh, I don't know about that, sir. When I was carrying my Johnny, it was 5 months before I twigged. I put it down to the milk stout.
Yes, well, I know you'll forgive me for pointing out, Mrs. Davis, you are of a different generation from Linda, are you not?
Well, it stands to reason.
You belong to a generation which tends to take relationships between the sexes rather more seriously than does the younger generation.
Yes, more's the pity.
Would you agree that in many ways your generation is somewhat naive in sexual matters?
Forgive me, Mr. Lotterby, if I appear somewhat obtuse, but I'm having difficulty following your line of questioning. What are you trying to elicit?
Your Lordship must bear with me if my approach appears to be somewhat oblique. I will put the matter to the witness quite bluntly. Mrs. Davis, knowing your daughter as you do you not agree that if there had been the slightest possibility of her being pregnant, the first thing Linda would have done would have been to arrange a pregnancy test?
Yes, that's exactly what she done, soon as she missed.
Oh, yes, I accept that Linda had a pregnancy test after the events which we've been discussing. In fact, you and your husband probably suggested it.
Oh, yeah, we insisted.
You insisted. Nevertheless, do you not agree that she may have had an earlier pregnancy test?
What do you mean?
I mean that at the time she met Mr. Lianas, she was already pregnant and knew herself to be pregnant.
Oh, no, Mr. Lotterby, I'm not having none of that. When that result came back from the chemist, it was a funny one. They said they couldn't be sure and told us to go back in a week. So when you get a funny result like that, it's early days. It stands to reason.
Oh, Mrs. Davis, you are not a doctor, are you?
No, I'm not.
Then you are hardly qualified to pass an opinion on medical matters.
No, I mayn't be no doctor, but I'm not stupid neither. When you get a dodgy result like that, it's early days.
My lord, I shall be calling medical evidence. Perhaps my learned friend would care to address his questions to the doctor.
Thank you, Miss Tate. Undoubtedly it would be of greater assistance to the jury if these matters were dealt with at the proper time.
As your lordship pleases.
Yeah, Mr. Lotterby, the judge is right, you know. You ask the doctor, he'll tell you the same as I've done. So we're expecting little Nick the Greek on April the 24th.
Mrs. Davis, I'm surprised you find the imminent birth of an illegitimate child a proper subject for levity.
Your grandchild, Mrs. Davis.
I'm sorry, your lordship. No disrespect intended, but it's just that I'm so choked, if I didn't laugh, I'd cry.
Mrs. Davis, I want you to understand this. I'm not suggesting that you or your husband were parties to a conspiracy to injure, or in common parlance, to frame my client.
Thank you very much.
What I am suggesting, however, is that for reasons of her own, whether to account for an existing pregnancy or in some crude attempt at blackmail, your daughter has deceived you.
She wouldn't do a thing like that.
Linda has deceived you, Mrs. Davis, just as she is now seeking to deceive the jury. And I suggest to you that your daughter's evidence is a pack of lies.
Don't you go say nothing like that about my Linda. She's been a good daughter to me, the best. And she ain't never told no lies in her life.
Unless your lordship has any further questions?
No, Miss Tate.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. That's all. You may stand down. I wonder whether your lordship would be so good as to allow me to call the doctor at this stage. I do appreciate that it is not in strict chronological order according to the witness list which your lordship has before you.
Oh, that never worries me, Miss Tate.
Well, the doctor is due to give evidence in court number 2 this afternoon in a case of death by dangerous driving, and I would like to complete his evidence before the adjournment.
Certainly, Miss Tate. Let the doctor be called straight away.
I'm obliged, my lord. Call Dr. Abdul Hussain.
Dr. Abdul Hussain, please.
Is your full name Abdul Hussain?
Yes, it is.
And you're a qualified doctor and a registered medical practitioner, at present employed at the Fulchester General Hospital.
Yes, I am.
Now, at 5 o'clock on the morning of the 14th of July this year, did you go to Fulchester Central Police Station?
Yes, I did.
Who asked you to attend?
Detective Inspector McGovern, ma'am.
Now, there, did you examine a young girl called Linda Davis?
Yes, I did.
Do you see Miss Davis in court today?
Yes, I do, over there.
Now, what did you find when you examined Miss Davis?
May I refer to my report, my lord? It was made right after I examined the patient.
Certainly.
I found Miss Davis a well-nourished young woman of good natural physique and appearance. Upon examination, I found in all 5 bruises on the front and sides of her throat, consistent with an attempt at manual strangulation. I found 3 long lacerations running from the right collarbone across the breast down to the ribcage, consistent with scratches made by human fingernails. I found 2 perfect circular indented wounds, consistent with human bite marks on the right.
More like flipping Dracula, I'd call it.
On the right-hand side of the base of the neck, I found extensive bruising on both buttocks and thighs, consistent with a sexual assault of some nature. I found traces of spermatozoa in the vagina and on the inside of both thighs, consistent with recent sexual intercourse.
Was the girl Virgo intacta?
No, she was not.
Could you tell when defloration had taken place?
No, it was not possible. After I examined the patient, I formed the conclusion that she had been no stranger to sexual activity in the past.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain. Please stay there.
Dr. Hussain, you've told his lordship and the jury of the exhaustive examination which you carried out upon Miss Davis.
I wouldn't say exhaustive, sir. I would say routine.
Doctor, did you perform a pregnancy test upon Miss Davis?
A pregnancy test? Of course not.
Oh, that's a pity, because it might have cleared up this whole business.
There would have been no point in performing such a test.
You mean until the hormone balance of the body had adjusted itself to pregnancy?
Exactly, sir. That takes some time to happen.
You didn't consider the possibility of there already existing a pregnancy resulting from previous acts of sexual intercourse?
There were no signs of pregnancy, and the idea never crossed my mind. I was only interested in patient's condition that night.
Dr. Hussain, as Mr. Lotterby has raised the matter, we had better pursue it to some sort of conclusion. If the laboratory result of a pregnancy test were doubtful, what significance as a doctor would you attach to that?
I take it that your lordship means that the result is what we call weakly positive.
Something of the sort.
It can mean that the test has been made too early.
Can it mean anything else?
Yes, my lord, it can. It can mean that the pregnancy is not well established, even if it is of several weeks' duration.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, my lord, that the fetus is at risk and is likely to become the victim of spontaneous abortions. For example, in the case of ectopic pregnancy, a pregnancy in the fallopian tube. Now, such a pregnancy cannot survive for more than 3 months under any circumstances and can indeed result in the death of the expectant mother.
Dr. Hussain, now let us come down to earth for a moment.
That is where we are, sir.
A few moments ago, you spoke of an ectopic pregnancy, a pregnancy in the fallopian tube, which might have unfortunate, even fatal results.
Yes, sir.
Now, in your own experience as a doctor of medicine and a member of the staff of an emergency and accident ward, how often have you come across a case of this sort?
Personally, sir, I have never treated such a case, but I read my books. I must keep my eyes open.
You are not a gynecologist?
No, I'm not. I'm a humble general medical practitioner. But I'm not stupid.
Oh, no, you're certainly not that, Doctor. So what you are saying boils down to this, does it not? That at the time of her pregnancy test, Linda Davis may have in fact been several weeks, even 2 or 3 months pregnant, but with a pregnancy which was likely to terminate itself by spontaneous abortion, or in plain English, by miscarriage.
Really, my lord, I must object. Now, how can Dr. Hussain be asked to give opinion on a test which he did not conduct himself and which was carried out some time after he'd seen the patient?
Very well, my lord. If my friend is upset at this line of inquiry, I'll leave it at that. But the jury has heard Dr. Hussain's evidence, and I'm sure they will find it extremely useful.
That was a bit naughty, Mr. Lotterby, as you very well know.
I can only crave your lordship's forgiveness and adopt another line of cross-examination. Doctor, I'd like you to look at the photograph Exhibit A, if you would.
Yes, sir, this is the patient I examined.
Yes, and these marks on her neck are no doubt the bruises you described in your report.
Yes, sir, but I would have thought that this photograph was taken sometimes after I examined the patient. The bruises are much more pronounced.
Oh, yes, Doctor, we'll concede that. We all know that bruises start red and then...
And my
turn
lord,
blue.
I really cannot understand why my learned friend insists upon giving the evidence himself when he has a perfectly competent medical witness to do it for him.
Mr. Lotterby, I'm sure the jury are duly impressed by your medical knowledge, but we are provided with Dr. Hussain's expertise.
Indeed, my lord. Now, Dr. Hussain, you've described these bruises as consistent with an attempted manual strangulation.
Yes, sir.
We do not agree that they are equally consistent with many other things, love bites, for example.
It is possible, but I don't think probable. There are 5 bruises, and as we all know, we have got 5 fingers on each hand.
Yes. Have you examined other victims of strangulation or attempted strangulation?
I'm not a pathologist, but I have seen 3 or 4.
And would you not agree, then, that it is more likely for a strangler to use 2 hands rather than 1?
Well, in the case of total strangulation, I would agree, but this was what I would call half-hearted attempt. I concluded that the assailant has used 1 hand to stop the girl crying out, while the other hand was busy elsewhere.
Yes. Doctor, would you please look at the photograph again?
With pleasure, sir.
Doctor, you will observe 3 long, horrible scratch marks.
I observed 3 scratch marks, sir.
Doctor, you will observe 2 horrible bite marks.
I observed 2 bite marks, sir.
Now, Dr. Hussain, would you be so good as to tell my lord and the jury what you deduced from these interesting marks?
I deduce nothing, sir, except that one woman's pain is another woman's pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain. A very fair, a very profound answer, if I may say so. Now, I'd like you to look at the other photograph, Exhibit B.
Yes, sir?
Now, this photograph shows the bruises on the lower part of Miss Davis's body, does it not?
Yes, sir.
Now, these could by no means be described as serious injuries, could they?
No, sir, I would say they are quite superficial.
Yes, would you agree that they are no more consistent with an attack than with perhaps rather over-enthusiastic lovemaking?
Yes, I do. If the girl had not been crying or so upset when I examined her, I wouldn't have placed any significance to these injuries.
So it was her general demeanor which caused you to conclude that she'd been attacked?
Yes, sir.
Not the injuries at all?
No, sir, I was a little puzzled when I examined the patient about the bruises on the neck, but as far as the other injuries are concerned, that's fair enough.
Dr. Hussain, I must thank you for the extremely fair way in which you've given your evidence. Thank you, Doctor.
Dr. Hussain, I do hate to be boring, but would you be so good as to look at the exhibits once again?
Certainly.
Let us first look at Exhibit A. Now, I don't want to make heavy weather out of this, but do you get the impression that this young lady is about to get a black eye?
Some 2-3 hours after the photograph was taken, I would agree.
Is the giving and receiving of a black eye consistent with lovemaking?
I wouldn't have thought so.
Well, let us look at the exhibit once more. Do you not observe that this girl has a split lip, Dr. Hussain?
Yes, I do.
Is that consistent with lovemaking?
Well, I would keep an open mind about that.
But would you not agree that it is more consistent as an act of violence than as an act of making love?
Your Lordship must forgive me, but I really cannot allow my friend to cross-examine her own witness.
Yes, Miss Tate, Mr. Lotterby is quite justified in objecting to that last question. Dr. Hussain is your witness. You must be content with his answers.
Your Lordship must forgive me. I will pursue the matter no further. Unless your Lordship has any further questions.
No, Miss Tate.
May the doctor be released.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain.
Thank you, my lord.
I call Arthur Albert Davis, my lord.
Arthur Albert Davis, please.
Are you Arthur Albert Davis, and you live at 9 Hugh Gateskill Court, Shingleborough?
Ma'am.
And are you the father of Miss Linda Davis, whose evidence we heard in court yesterday?
Ma'am.
Mr. Davis, can you cast your mind back to the evening of July the 14th last?
Ma'am.
Did anything unusual happen that evening?
Yes, ma'am. My daughter came home at 0400 hours, ma'am.
What kind of condition was she in, Mr. Davis?
She was fully clothed, ma'am.
Yes, but was anything unusual about her manner? I mean, was she distressed in any way?
Oh, yes, she was distressed all right after I'd finished with her.
Well, did she make a complaint within your hearing?
Yes, she complained to her mother. Nearly shouted the place down.
What was she complaining about?
Well, ma'am, as a matter of fact, she was complaining about me. You will understand, ma'am, that as a military man, I believe in discipline. She came in at 4 Ac Emma, so I gave her a damn good hiding.
Mr. Davis, did your daughter make any other complaint?
I can't say, ma'am. I was so busy sorting her out that I didn't care to listen.
Mr. Davis, I want you to apply your mind to what I am asking you.
Ma'am.
Now, Mrs. Davis has told the court that you both took your daughter to the police station later that night. Now, why did you do that?
I'm sorry, ma'am. Now I understand your drift. My wife and I took her to Fulchester Police Station on account of her violation by a brutal Greek, ma'am.
Now, how did you know that she had been violated, as you put it, by a brutal Greek, Mr. Davis?
She told us, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Please remain there.
Now, Mr. Davis, you've told us that as a military man you believe in discipline.
Sir.
Would I be right in thinking you are, in fact, an old soldier?
I served for 20 years, sir.
Where did you serve, Mr. Davis?
Malaya, Korea, Aden, and Western Germany, sir. The last 7 years, I was staff sergeant at Woolwich Barracks, sir.
Now, Mr. Davis, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have gained the impression that you are the kind of man who has strong views on the upbringing of the young.
Sir, I may be old-fashioned, but I happen to be proud of it.
And by old-fashioned, Mr. Davis, I take it that you believe in a modicum of discipline for the young.
Yes, sir.
Even at times in corporal punishment?
Yes, sir. Within reason, sir. By that I mean nothing brutal. But I don't stand no nonsense, and I won't take no lip.
And you would regard staying out until 4 o'clock in the morning as a good reason for chastising your daughter?
Yes, sir. I regard it as an outrage.
Now, you have told us that you gave her, in your own words, a damn good hiding. Now, what exactly does that entail?
First, I struck her across the face with the back of my hand.
Mr. Davis, I notice you're wearing a ring.
Sir?
Were you wearing it at the time?
Always wear it, sir. Bought it in Singapore.
So it's possible that you might have accidentally split her lip with it?
Quite possible, sir.
Did you also give her a black eye?
Oh, no, sir. I regard that as too extreme.
So having struck her, as you have said, across the face, what did you proceed to do then?
I put her across my knee and took my belt to her.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Just one moment, Mr. Davies.
My lord.
Mr. Davies, on the evening which we've been discussing, had you any reason to believe or to suspect that your daughter might already be pregnant?
Oh, no, my lord. I regard her as totally chaste, my lord. As pure as my own mother. And may she rest in peace.
Unless your lordship has any further questions.
No, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. You may stand down, but please remain in the court. I call Detective Inspector McGovern, my lord.
Detective Inspector McGovern.
Almighty God, the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Ian McGovern, Detective Inspector, Fulchester City Police Force, at present attached to Fulchester Central Police Station.
Detective Inspector McGovern, will you please give us your evidence?
I will. Please, may I refer to my notebook?
When were the notes made?
Immediately after the event I'm about to describe.
Very well, Mr. McGovern, please carry on.
At 4:25 on the morning of the 14th of July this year, as the result of a message, I attended the CID room at Fulchester Central Police Station. I there saw three persons who I can now identify as the witness, Linda Davis, Mrs. Doris Davis, and Arthur Albert Davis. There were also present in the room Station Sergeant Mitchell and WPC Kane. The two female witnesses were in a weeping and distressed condition. After 4 or 5 minutes, the witness, Linda Davis, made a complaint to me, as a result of which I sent for Dr. Hussain and shortly afterwards for the police photographer.
Inspector, will you describe in more detail the condition, both emotional and physical, that you found Linda Davis in?
Well, at first it was difficult to sort out exactly what was going on. I thought I'd taken a day trip to the Wailing Wall. Both women were quite hysterical, sir. But after they'd been proffered cups of tea by WPC Kane, they calmed down a bit.
Inspector, let us be more precise. What was Linda Davis's emotional condition?
Oh, very bad. She was weeping, sobbing. She was distressed, hysterical.
Did you get the impression that she was play-acting in any way?
Oh, no. I've had occasion to observe a large number of hysterical women during my service with the CID, and I think I can distinguish those who are genuine from those who are putting it on.
And what was her physical condition?
I came to the conclusion she'd been beaten up.
Thank you, Inspector. Now, you've told us that Linda Davis made a complaint to you.
She did.
Did you make any further inquiries regarding the truth or otherwise of this particular complaint?
Yes, I did. At 6 a.m. on the morning of the 14th of July this year, in company with other officers, I drove to the shipyard of Hill and Burton at Shingleborough, where I believed the yacht Liana to be berthed. The Liana had attracted a great deal of publicity in the neighborhood on account of being so large. The yacht was not in her berth or anywhere to be found in the vicinity. Well, I don't know how it was done. It was as though it had vanished into thin air.
The case of the Queen against Lianas will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court.